Hey, it's Keith from Outlaw Speed Shop, and welcome to this month's Four Horsemen build. The car is a Blown Corvette. The challenge is to make it pro street. And we all obviously have to do the same thing, and we all have our own take and versions of what we envision things to be. That's what makes these challenges so exciting. So obviously, you have to start by taking it apart, which is pretty simple. It's a plastic base. So that's step one. I usually like to just take everything apart, kind of look at it, see what I'm up against, see what the problems are. This one, as much as I enjoy the challenge of Pro Street, this was a challenge for me. You'd think, based on the type of builds I usually do, that it would be fairly simple. I let this project, and this happens a lot, and the more you build, the more you'll, if you guys build these at all, you'll run into this where you kind of get in your own head and you make it more complicated than what you envisioned. So I'm taking these Matchbox wheels because they're about the biggest and widest wheels I could find, not by a lot, but they definitely are. I'd probably say at least an eighth of an inch bigger all the way around than any of the Hot wheels I have in stock. So obviously with the Pro Street, you got to tuck these big fat ass meats underneath the rear. And this reminds me of the 80s and stuff that was very popular. We would tub out, and pretty much all you have is a pumpkin and a short axle, and that would be as much meat as you could fit underneath the rear end. Usually if you have enough tire, you have to have a lot of motor. They weren't the easiest things to drive at all. They were designed to go straight, but they were pretty much cruisers. Not, to me, they weren't the best cars in the world. I wasn't a huge fan even when they were popular. But again, that's me, and I have my own tastes and likes and dislikes. So obviously I have to start by narrowing the rear end. Now I could have back half this, like actually what you would really do in real life, but I'm going to end up just trimming the chassis because this is very integral into the car, and you can actually see a lot of the side pieces and everything else when it's all assembled. So to try and cut it off like right there straight across, it would have been a challenge to integrate the back part of it and have a place for the rear bumper to sit on and everything else. So it was just easier to trim. So I kind of took a rough estimate of where I needed to cut, and my small disc that I use for cutoff wheels, I don't throw anything away, and I'll use it until it breaks. Would have been perfect for this, but I don't have one. So I get this big ass cutting disc. It was all I actually had in stock. So to try to cut it, I have to kind of go on an angle, and it's just kind of a pain in the ass. So don't throw away anything, especially tools that you can possibly use. There's a purpose for everything, and the more you build, the more you'll find out. Even if something's almost pretty much beat, you can find a use for it. So of course I'm a hoarder, so can't go by me, but anyways, so I'm kind of getting creative on how I take it off, which is a little bit at a time. And I'm pretty much going up to where I'd say the inside of the molded leaf springs are on the actual chassis itself. So I'll cut a little bit, I grind a little bit, I'll use my knife to, kind of smooth things out so I get the dingleberries off and everything. You can kind of see right there how far in I went. Now I just got to do the other side. And but here you can, the problem I ran into with this is the front's not bad, but the axles that came with the Matchbox are bigger than Hot Wheels. So the piano wire, or I guess you could say I think I have brass rod, I forget the size, that I actually use for making axles. On the front, worked perfectly. On the rear, the holes are bigger, and I have to actually use the axles that came with it, which makes it very challenging, to say the least. And I didn't find that out until after I cut it. Fortunately, if you guys remember, I did a Matchbox Charger, a larger one. And the axle size on that, even though it was a bigger wheel, actually it was the right size. So I was able to salvage that one and cut it in half and use that. But by doing that, I pretty much have to make an axle tube, which was um, challenging to say the least, because of obviously the fact that the rear end, or the distance between the two wheels, is very narrow. So it makes it kind of difficult. So that being said, after the car is out of the stripper, I'm done playing around with it and making sure I've got to do what I've got to do. I will go through with my wire brush, and again, I keep these until there's nothing left on them. This is actually a fairly new one, and I'll use all of them to get into all the different nooks and crannies, because you've got body lines that sometimes the citrus strip or whatever you're using for stripper doesn't always get out. So I've got brass, I've got the softer steel ones here. You can see I've got one that was a cone at one point. Now it's just kind of I don't even know what you call it, but that helps get in the inside areas, like where the tabs are. So Scotch-Brite, the outside, kind of gives it an even finish and allows me to see what I'm up against as far as any imperfections in the body. And there's very few castings that you're going to find once you strip all the paint down, and especially the newer stuff. You very rarely find anything that's really good. These things have been cast and recast, and they're just horrible. There's some pretty decent sized marring on the passenger side front fender. So I'm using some 360 grit, which is a little bit aggressive, but it was a pretty deep mar that the thick paint that from the factory just covered. You didn't even see it. So and once I think that's pretty decent, I'll Scotch-Brite it again. If it's something that needs a little bit more, I'll use, like 400 and then 600. I've got this. I got it off of Amazon, I think. They're cheap drill bits, but for a lot of stuff that I do, I find it really helpful to have it kicking around. And here I'm just kind of drilling out. There's 4 dump tubes that come out the side of the body. Again, not a fan of it, but what I'm going to do is I'm just kind of putting a dimple in each one, so it's a little bit more realistic, I guess you could say. It's a little challenging to get in there because everything's on an angle. So I'm kind of using my finger. You can see I'm pushing up against the drill bit to hold it. Don't try this if you haven't done it before, because you'll pinch your skin and rip your finger off, and then you have to go to the hospital and you have to tell them I told you to do it, and it just gets really ugly. So anyways, the front and rear I'm keeping chrome, so I'm just going to mask that off so that I can paint the interior. What I end up doing is I end up using the Tamiya fine gray primer as a base coat, and then I loved the way it looked, so I actually kept it. I didn't paint, I just left the primer. But the fine gray is if you put it on just right, you don't have to. It looks great. It doesn't look like a rough primer that you could get like out of a Krylon can or anything like that. So it gives it a nice gray cloth look that I really kind of dig. So I was going to paint it black originally, and that's kind of where I was heading. And I just decided to keep it with the primer because it looked really good, and it's going to match the exterior color that I end up choosing. So it worked out perfectly. But yeah, I just masked everything off because you don't want to get overspray on anything. Unless you plan on. In the 80s, it was popular to actually paint the chrome bumpers and keep everything a monocolor. I don't know, it was just horrible. I get flashbacks just thinking about it. But anyways, at least it's not paisley or peach or one of those god-awful putrid colors that they painted everything. And I lived through the 80s too. So I get this splash red paint. It's competition red. And I'm going to paint both the chassis and the body, the competition red, because that's, like I said, the way it sits, the chassis is visible underneath, so at least on the side pieces in the front and the rear. So now I'm going to go kind of a little old school here. I've got my Microsol, I got some scissors, I got a X-Acto knife, some brushes, and I'm going to go with the old school. I got these from the Redline shop. The Vette decals that actually I have a couple of these from my childhood collection. So you'll recognize it once I put them on there if you haven't already. I had to cut out for the hood scoop and everything else. But other than that, they went on great. A little challenging because the hood has a lot of different contours because it bulks up for the L88 hood, and it's got I guess you could say different little things on it that's just kind of a pain in the ass. So once I got it on there and got it lined up, I end up using the microsol twice. I put it on and then I went down like a half an hour later and it was still wrinkly, so I put it on again. It worked out perfect. It all shrunk down around like it was supposed to. Now it's time to clear. I got my nace on. This is a 2K clear because the splash paints is a 2-part process. It's a base coat, clear coat, so any 2K clear will work. And here's the finished parts. I put it on pretty heavy and it looks really good. Unfortunately, I'm not 100% happy with the way this thing turned out. The execution part of it was, when it came to the wheels, is not very good. I'm probably going to redo it and take it apart next week and rethink my process here. I've got another one of these kicking around. So this is what I started with. If you recall, pretty killer looking car. I like the casting. This is what I ended up with. Like I said, I'm not 100% happy with it. There's a few things I would have done differently. Sometimes you get so deep down the rabbit hole you just can't get out of it. So the paint and the decals and everything is perfect. I'm not going to redo that, but I'm definitely going to redo the wheels because I am 100% not happy with it. And as stupid as it looks, it does match the 80s, but other than that. So anyways, I hope you guys like this. Make sure you check out the other guys' builds. The links will be in the description below. I'll catch you on the next one.